Architects like Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius introduced a radical new vision. Architecture doesn't need unnecessary ornamentation. It should be simple, functional, and universal. Mies van der Rohe's famous phrase, "less is more," became the guiding principle for an entire generation of designers. Hey everyone, I'm Mark, and welcome to Why Buildings Matter, a shortcast series brought to you by the Architecture Hypothesis podcast. This series is designed to be short and digestible, something you can listen to during your free time, at the end of the day, on a train, a bus, or whenever you feel like diving into thought-provoking discussions about architecture. Each episode will explore a key architectural concept and discuss a fascinating book on architectural theory or criticism. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Today, we're embarking on a special journey, exploring architecture through the lens of semiotics. Have you ever stepped into a building and immediately felt drawn in, overwhelmed, or even confused without being able to explain why? Have you ever looked at soaring Gothic cathedrals, imposing Roman columns, or sleek modern glass towers and wondered, what message are these buildings trying to convey? Well, today, we're going to decode the language of architecture. How buildings are not just physical structures, but also vessels of stories, cultural messages, and even political and social ideas. Imagine stepping into a grand public square where a towering historical monument stands. Even without anyone explaining its meaning to you, you can sense its solemnity, its historical significance, and the power of the space around it. Or maybe you walk through a long, narrow corridor with a low ceiling. Do you feel pressure? A sense of restriction? On the other hand, when you enter a bright, open space filled with natural light, do you feel relaxed? A sense of ease and comfort. That is the power of architecture. It does more than create spaces for us to live and work in. It influences our emotions, our behaviors, and the way we experience the world. Is architecture a form of communication? The answer is yes. But this is a silent language. Instead of words or sounds, architecture communicates through form, material, light, and space. The Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, known as the father of semiotics, pointed out that every sign has two components. The signifier, this refers to the physical form of a building. The signified, this is the meaning that the structure conveys. For example, a Gothic cathedral is not just a place of worship. Its soaring arches and high ceilings are not merely a technical construction feat. They symbolize humanity's spiritual aspiration, a connection between earth and heaven. A medieval castle is not just a fortress. Its thick stone walls and towering watchtowers are symbols of power, strength, and resilience. An amusement park with soft curves and bright colors is not just a place for entertainment. It conveys energy, excitement, and joy. See? Architecture is a system of signs where every physical element holds a deeper meaning. Now, let's go even deeper. How exactly does architecture speak to us? To answer this, let's take a quick journey through history. In ancient Rome, architecture was more than just an artistic expression. It was a political tool. Corinthian columns, grand domes, and monumental amphitheaters were not just built for function. They served as symbols of imperial power. Roman forums, vast open spaces where political debates and public discussions took place, were designed to reflect transparency, authority, and order in society. Moving into the Middle Ages, we see the rise of Gothic cathedrals across Europe. Their towering spires, intricate stained glass windows, and solemn statues weren't just aesthetic choices. They created an atmosphere of divinity and faith, drawing people toward spirituality. Then came the 20th century, which brought a completely different movement, modernism. Architects like Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius introduced a radical new vision, Architecture doesn't need unnecessary ornamentation. It should be simple, functional, and universal. Mies van der Rohe's famous phrase, "less is more," became the guiding principle for an entire generation of designers. Glass skyscrapers, steel structures, and minimalist concrete buildings emerged, not only in Europe, but across the globe. But then, modernism ran into a major problem when every city started looking the same, filled with identical glass towers. People began feeling disconnected from their surroundings. Architecture is not just about function, it must also resonate with people and their cultural identities. That's where postmodernism comes in. As a reaction against the uniformity of modernism, architects like Robert Venturi called for a return to symbolism, color, and playful forms in architecture. Venturi famously said, "Let's bring joy and diversity back into architecture." And so, buildings started incorporating more variety, cultural references, and unique forms. As you can see, architecture is never just about buildings. It is about stories, memories, and the evolution of cultural identities over time. So take a look at the space you live in. Does it tell a story? Try reading the architecture around you. Now that we've covered how architecture has evolved as a form of communication, let's explore semiotics even further. Within semiotic theory, architecture is understood as a system of meaning, where every element has the potential to be a sign, a symbol, or an indicator of something deeper. American philosopher and semiotician Charles Sanders Peirce categorized architectural signs into three types. Iconic signs. These signs resemble what they represent. Example: a rounded dome in an Islamic mosque can evoke the image of the sky, representing the divine. Indexical signs. These signs have a direct connection to reality. Example: stained glass windows in a Gothic cathedral transform light into a spiritual experience, symbolizing the presence of God. Symbolic signs. These signs have meanings that are culturally assigned and learned over time. Example: the dragon in traditional Asian architecture is not just a decorative figure. It symbolizes power and protection. But semiotics doesn't just stop at symbols. The way we experience a space also plays a role in its meaning. French phenomenologist Maurice Merleau-Ponty took this idea further. In his book, Phenomenology of Perception, he argued that architecture is not something we just see. It is something we live within. A building is not just a physical object, it is an environment that shapes our emotions, behavior, and memory. For example, a long, narrow corridor with dim lighting can make us feel trapped or isolated. A vast, open hall with abundant natural light can evoke freedom and tranquility. One important question arises: are we losing our ability to interpret architectural meaning? In reality, architecture does more than just communicate ideas. It also plays a crucial role in shaping identity, both at an individual level and within entire communities. Christian Norberg Schulz, a scholar in phenomenological architecture, introduced the concept of genius loci, or the spirit of a place. According to him, every building is not merely an assembly of materials. It possesses a unique soul, reflecting local identity and fostering a deep connection between space and people. For example, a traditional Japanese temple, built with natural wood, curved roofs, and Zen gardens, is more than just a physical structure. It embodies Buddhist philosophy, harmony with nature, and a profound sense of serenity. On the other hand, a glass skyscraper in a bustling metropolis carries a completely different message. It signifies economic development, corporate power, and globalization. But as the world becomes more uniform, are we losing the local identity of architecture? Nowadays, modern glass towers can be found everywhere, from Dubai to Shanghai to New York. But do these buildings truly represent the culture of the cities they belong to? Or are they simply symbols of globalization, disconnected from their local histories? This is the concern many architects and urban theorists are grappling with today. How can architecture remain modern while preserving cultural identity and meaning? For centuries, architecture was shaped by hand craftsmanship, local expertise, and cultural traditions. But today, digital tools such as parametric design, AI-driven modeling, and 3D printing are transforming how we design buildings. Some of the world's most iconic modern buildings, such as the Gherkin in London, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, and the Guangzhou Opera House, were all made possible by sophisticated computer algorithms. While these advancements expand creative possibilities, they also raise concerns. Are we losing cultural identity in favor of algorithm-driven aesthetics? Are cities around the world starting to look too similar? Are buildings being reduced to visual spectacles rather than meaningful symbols? In the past, architecture was deeply rooted in its local environment. A building was designed based on the climate, geography, and cultural heritage of the region. But today, a glass and steel skyscraper can be placed anywhere in the world, regardless of its surroundings. Rebecca Rousey, a researcher in architectural semiotics and technology, has pointed out that while algorithmic design allows for breathtaking structures, it also risks stripping buildings of their cultural meaning. A key example? The rise of generic commercial architecture. More and more, architecture is becoming a product, something to be consumed rather than experienced. Consider shopping malls. You know, when every shopping mall in Bangkok starts looking like one in Paris, something important gets lost: the uniqueness of space. Cities begin to lose their character when every urban center starts looking the same. Instead of each place having its own soul, everything starts blending together. And before we know it, local identity disappears. And then there's architecture itself. When buildings use certain design elements just because they look good, without any real cultural or historical meaning, they turn into empty decorations. They lose their depth, their significance, their story. Think about city skylines. Architect Christian Norberg Schultz had a warning about this. He talked about genius loci, which means the spirit of a place. When architecture loses that spirit, we're not just losing unique buildings, we're losing a piece of our collective memory and cultural heritage. So here's a big question. Can new technology help us preserve the deeper meaning of architecture? Or is it just accelerating the erasure of local identity? That's something we're still trying to figure out. Before we wrap up, let's reflect on some of the main ideas from today's discussion. Architecture still has the power to communicate as long as we design with purpose and learn how to interpret its meaning. There are so many ways to keep the symbolic power of buildings alive, from storytelling architecture to interactive design and beyond. So here's my challenge for you. Take a moment to look at the buildings around you. Do they have meaning? Do they tell a story? Or have they lost their voice? Thanks for joining me on this journey into architecture and semiotics. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. And I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll keep exploring the fascinating connections between space, culture, and architecture. If you enjoyed today's episode of Why Buildings Matter, consider supporting us by buying a coffee. Links to Ko-fi and PayPal are in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode of Why Buildings Matter.